I'm making this video to go over a few important topics surrounding grades in a Moodle course and ELIS. In particular, what to do if you wanted to include particular grades from an activity within a Moodle course. Basically, what you're going to need to do is create learning objectives for each of these assignments and have them added to the ELIS course description. But before we can do that, there's a few things that are important to think about when you're looking at the Moodle course itself. First of all, when you go into the gradebook for a Moodle course, so if I go down to the course administration and then gradebook, the way that a Moodle gradebook calculates grades is it's pretty simple by default. It takes all of the grades, anything that has a grade within the course, and it does an average of it. And it's pretty much a straight average. So whatever you've set as the maximum score for each one of these grades is going to get averaged in together. So if it's 100 points for each one, the learner gets 90 on each one, then that final grade is going to be a 90 because it's 90, 90, 90. The way that Moodle is also going to be grading it is that course average here is always going to be, by default, based on whatever the grades are at the time. So if I score a 90 on the first assignment, then my average is going to show up as a 90, even though I haven't done the other two, because Moodle's only going to average numbers that exist in the gradebook by default. Now that's fine and good for most instances, but with ELIS this can become an issue, because if you've set your course description in ELIS to be considered complete when a learner has reached a certain grade, say they only have to reach a 70 in the course to earn completion, as soon as that happens, whether or not they've completed the other things or not, then ELIS is going to consider them as being completed. So while there might be 3 other grades waiting to be done, if they do well enough on the first one, then that could technically trigger completion in ELIS if there's no other requirements other than just that they have to have a grade of at least a 70. So the first thing that we could do to make this not happen is we can tell Moodle to not just average numbers, but also average blanks as if they were a 0. And so in effect what this would do is you would start off with a 0 in the course, and even if I got a 100 on the first assignment, my overall average would only be a 33 because I've only done 33% of the work. So it's kind of more like a moving average. You start off with 0, and hopefully by the end of the course you attain the required grade by the end. So to make this happen, you go into the gradebook just like what I've done, and basically what you need to do is you need to go to your categories and items. And I've turned on the drop-down menu and also the tabs layout. Most of the time, drop-down menu is what's going to be enabled for most sites, so I'm going to use that. So I go down to the full view of categories and items, full view, and this is going to give me a lot more ability to kind of fine-tune how Moodle is averaging these grades. So as you can see right here, the max grade for each one is 100 points, so it's going to basically just do a rough average and arrive at the course total. A simple way that I can kind of fix what I talked about earlier is this checkbox right here which says aggregate only non-empty grades. So this is basically telling Moodle that only include numbers in the average. So if there's a dash, if there's an empty grade, skip over it. We don't want that to happen, so I'm going to go ahead and unselect this and save changes. So now, if I go back to the main page of the grades are basically going to be starting off as a 0. Everybody starts off as a 0, and as they progress through the course, their average will increase until they achieve the final goal. So that's the first thing that most people need to do in their Moodle courses when they're preparing them for ELIS. The second thing, as I said before, is say we wanted to take some of these assignments and include them in the ELIS reporting. And the way to do that is through a learning objective. So we would add these in as learning objectives. A good way to think of learning objectives is that they are required scores within a grade. Something like you can't pass this course unless you've made at least a certain grade on each of these 3 assignments. So we're kind of singling out particular grades from a Moodle course as important and something that we want to track. Now the way to do this is we have to basically give ELIS a way to know that there's something in the course that is important enough for us to track. And that's going to be through the learning objective. And the way to make ELIS be able to pick up these grades is we have to add an ID number into the actual settings for each of these assignments. And this would be true of any activity that has a grade that you wanted to track. So assignments, quizzes, questionnaires, anything that has a grade that you wanted to have pulled into ELIS, you would need to follow these steps. And it's pretty much the same for everything. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the grade, or to the assignment that I want to use as a grade. And I'm going to scroll down. I don't care about availability or submission types. I'm assuming all of this has already been set up. What I'm interested in is the common module settings. And this is something that's overlooked quite often in most Moodle courses. It's not a required field, and it's something that is only useful in this circumstance where we're trying to link something in Moodle to something else. And that's going to be the ID number. So I need to put something in this ID number so that ELIS will be able to recognize it. Now the ID number, it doesn't have to be a number. It can be really anything. In fact, one thing that I've sometimes done is just whatever's in the assignment name, I can paste into the ID number so that it's easily, available and readable, and I understand it. But whatever you do, it's probably a good idea to make sure that you have a common kind of formula or method for coming up with the ID number of these different assignments. So I pasted in an ID number there, and I'm just going to hit save and return to course. And then I'm going to do that with these other three as well. And again, this common module settings is a pretty common area in just about every single Moodle activity or resource. There's going to be a common module settings, and it's almost in the same place even too. Okay, so we've got our ID numbers listed in for all of our assignments that we wanted to count as a grade. So now the thing becomes we need to go ahead and add these into the course description. Depending on how your course description is set up, you might want to keep this window open really quick for a reason I'll just show you in a second. So I'm going to go into my program management block, and I'm going to go to manage course descriptions, but I'm just going to open it up in a different tab. I'm going to want to keep this course page open for just a second, then you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to go down to my course descriptions that I've got, and I've already got a course description created for this particular course, course number 1. So I'm going to go in and edit that course description again. And you'll notice that the completion grade here is set to an 80. And so if I hadn't done that little trick in the gradebook, deselected that box, it would have meant that if somebody got an 80 on that initial assignment, then they would have had the entire course description checked off as complete, because as soon as they register an 80 in their final grade, that's all that it takes. So in addition to that, I'm also going to add in learning objectives, and there's a tab up at the top of every course description for learning objectives. So I'm going to go ahead and click on learning objectives. There's none that have been defined yet, so I'm going to go ahead and add an element. Now, because I have listed that Moodle course as a template, if I wanted to, I could click on this Browse button, and it knows to go and look for that Moodle course because I've saved it in as a template, and it's going to pull up all the activities that have grades associated with it. Now, I've already gone in and added in those ID numbers, and so that's what's in the parentheses. And because of that, I can really easily just click on the one that I want. I could give it a separate name, and then here I can put in a completion grade. So this is basically saying, what does somebody have to get in order to have this particular learning objective be considered complete? So I'll say an 80. And also notice that I can make it required. So unless they've gotten an 80 on this assignment, they will never pass this learning objective. They'll never have it be considered complete. It's kind of like an additional rule for completion. So I can hit Save Changes, and I've added in that first assignment as a learning objective. Now, while we're looking at this page, it's also important to note if I didn't have an ID number listed here, it would still show up, but in parentheses it would say no ID, and I wouldn't be able to just click on it. Again, it's the ID number that serves as the link. And so even if you just put in the name of the assignment, ELIS won't know to go and look for it. That's ID number is key. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Save Changes. In this one, I'm going to go ahead and add another element, but rather than using the browse, let's say that I didn't have this linked up to a Moodle template under the edit settings, the settings of this course description. What if there wasn't a Moodle template? You can still link up learning objectives. You just won't be able to use the browse button because ELIS wouldn't know which Moodle course you're going to be using as a template. Okay, and so that's why I said it might be sometimes beneficial to keep up the course in another tab. So if you're linking these up to a Moodle course that doesn't have a template, it might be a good idea to be able to go back in here, scroll down to the ID number for the thing that you're looking for, or just memorize it, but I'm just going to copy and paste it, and then I can just copy and paste it in here. Either way works. It accomplishes the same goal as long as that ID number is exactly what's listed in the ID number for the assignment. And so there you go. We've got now 2 additional kind of rules that are required in order for somebody to complete this course description. Not only do they have to have an overall grade of an 80 in that final average, but they also have to have a specific grade on individual activities. Assignment number 1 and assignment number 2 also has to be an 80. And so you can kind of pick and choose. You can create different requirements based on the needs within your course. You could also make these not required if you wanted to just kind of use the learning objective as a way to track individual grades within the course when you pulled reports on the users through ELIS. It just depends on what your goal is for using these learning objectives.